Welcome back everyone to the GCN Racing News Show. This week we're going to look back at more road racing from the past week, and hasn't it been a joy to be able to watch some live? 5 things we've learnt from the Tour de la Provence, plus a dramatic sprint finish at the Clasica de Almeria. We've also got Jeremy wrapping up the weekend cyclocross races, the route for this year's Vuelta, and all your other racing related news too. This week in the world of racing, we learnt that Julian Alaphilippe possesses teleportation capabilities.
Those gaps just become bigger. Oh.
Whoa! Was that Alaphilippe?
Yeah, he just decided to go the other way around the roundabout, I think.
I think he might have actually gone...
Oh, where's he gone now?
I don't know.
Oh,
there it is.
Or maybe he just knows which way around the roundabout is the quickest one. Nonetheless, entertaining as ever. We also learned what allowed Marcel Kittel to win so many sprint finishes. Last week he revealed the peak power numbers from his career, and they are eye-watering. 1,940 watts for 3 seconds was his record in training, although apparently it was slightly lower at the end of races. And finally this week we learnt that Egan Bernal is almost back to his best. Not quite as good as his teammate Ivan Ramiro Sosa, perhaps that was just down to tactics, but either way, it was Sosa who took victory on both the Queen Stage and the general classification of the 4-day Tour de la Provence last week. The race began with back-to-back wins for De Koning Quick-Step and their rider Davide Ballerini. On stage 1, it looked like it was Arnaud Démar's to lose, but lose it he did. Ballerini somehow managed to not only close a decent-sized gap, but then come around the French champion before they crossed the finish line. What was remarkable about that day was that Julian Alaphilippe had been away for 70 kilometres in a 3-up breakaway with Giulio Ciccone and Gianni Moscon, and then still had the power and energy to help with the team's lead out after being caught with just 2 kilometres to go. Ladies and gentlemen, Alaphilippe is back, and it's absolutely wonderful to watch. 24 hours later, and with an uphill drag to the line on stage 2, we weren't sure if they'd be riding for Ballerini or for Alaphilippe, but whatever the answer to that was, they had no choice really after this incident with just over a K to go. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt, and thankfully for De Koning, it didn't stop them winning. Despite the severity of that final few kilometres, Ballerini managed to show everybody how it was done again, pipping Giulio Ciccone of Trek Segafredo to the line. Now, the race was always, though, going to be decided on stage 3, finishing as it did on the slopes of Mont Ventoux, albeit 7 k's from the top at Chalet Reynard. Now, it's a much anticipated mountain, this one, certainly by me anyway, given the number of class climbers that we had in attendance, and it didn't disappoint. Astana started out amongst the favourites for the day, and they were the first to go on the offensive with Harold Tejada. It came to knout, though, and in the end, they were not able to come close to challenging the climbing might of the Ineos Grenadiers, whose young Spanish star Carlos Rodriguez set such a scintillating pace that only a handful of riders were left when he peeled off with 4 kilometres still to the top. After that, Sosa then went on the attack, the rest looked at each other, and that was that. Try as he might, Alaphilippe couldn't claw the Colombian back, nor get rid of Egan Bernal, who would go on to finish second behind his teammate on the stage, and then third on the GC after Alaphilippe took some bonus seconds on the final day. Now, that final stage was expected to be a sprint, and that's exactly what we got. Phil Bauhaus coming with some incredible speed in the closing 100 metres and getting the better of Davide Ballerini, with a frustrated Nasser Bouhanni having to settle for third. Notable, though, by his absence from that sprint was Arnaud Démar. More on that coming up shortly. Now, Sosa safely crossed the line on the day in 24th place, and that sealed the overall honours. So what did we learn from 4 days of exciting racing around southern France? Well, number 1, Bernal is back on some great form, isn't he? You're only ever as good as your last race, and I think his painful exit from the Tour de France last year was still fresh in all of our minds, and therefore a question mark hung over his head before the first mountain test of this year. However, he passed that test with flying colours, looking comfortable all the way up that mountain. Now, of course, there was no Pogačar in attendance, pretty much Roglic wasn't there, but nevertheless, this, I think, bodes very well for him this season, although he has said that those back problems are not yet completely behind him, and it's something he's going to have to work on continually over the coming weeks and months. Now, similarly, we learnt that Giulio Ciccone of Trek Segafredo is also very much back on track. So his 2020 season was hit not through injury like Bernal's, but rather through illness, and specifically COVID-19. The Tour de la Provence was his first race since abandoning the Giro d'Italia last October, but from the very first day, it was clear that he's not that far off his best form already. It was he who provoked the stage 1 attack that drew Moscon and Alaphilippe from the bunch. He then finished second to Ballerini the following day and was in the group that was the best of the rest on Saturday's mountaintop finish. Now, he's got a mainly Italian programme from now on, which leads him into the Giro d'Italia, and I don't think it's going to be all that long before he gets to raise his arms in the air and celebrate a big victory. And you very much get the same impression now with Alaphilippe, don't you? I mean, the man just never fails to hit the headlines. If you think back to the races in which he's competed since that World Championships win in Italy, Brabantse Pijl, where he beat Van der Poel, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, raised his arms, hadn't even won, later demoted, Tour of Flanders, huge crash, end of season. Stage 1 of the Tour de la Provence, he was on the attack and then straight into his lead-out train. Stage 2, he becomes the Houdini of roundabouts and then crashes near the finish. Stage 3, third behind 2 of the best climbers in the world. Quite incredible. Long live Julian Alaphilippe at the top of the cycling game. I mean, he is just so good for our sport. Meanwhile, we learned that his teammate Ballerini can pretty much do anything. He's obviously a rider who can sprint very well, but he can also climb, particularly on the shorter bergs. And so you wonder where exactly his future lies. Maybe it's in the cobbled classics, particularly given the team that he rides for. Now, it does seem like it's a matter of time before he wins big. I've just got no idea exactly where that's going to be. We also learned over that 4-day race that Ivan Ramirez Sosa is one of the most talented climbers in the world, but that he still needs to prove himself at the biggest races. His wins in France last week were the 12th and 13th of his pro career, but they've all come in relatively small races, never in the World Tour at least. At just 23 years of age, he's still got plenty of time to prove me wrong, but I've just got my doubts about how far he can go in the longer races, which have back-to-back mountains. We shall see. We also learnt that Matteo Jorgensen has a very bright future. The young American from Team Movistar was on the attack late on stage 2 and then still managed to get up there for the sprint before being taken out by a spectator who was hanging over the barriers. That didn't stop him though, putting in a very impressive performance less than 24 hours later on the slopes to Chalet Reynard. There he ended up finishing in 12th position on the stage. Now again, it's quite difficult to know what his speciality as a pro cyclist is going to be. He was up there in Milano-San Remo last year, for example, but there's little doubt he's going to shine somewhere very soon indeed. Next up, we can conclude, I think, that there are a few question marks hanging over Arnaud Démare. So he hit out early on stage 1, but then on yesterday's stage, he just didn't seem to quite have the confidence to follow his teammates to the front of the bunch. I was looking at the overhead shots. He constantly lost their wheels despite their best efforts, and his hopes for a stage victory were basically over before they'd even really started. I mean, it's not a big deal. This isn't the biggest race, of course, and there are plenty more to come, but sprinters really do thrive on confidence, and that stage just might have knocked his a bit. We shall see on that too. Finally, it was just bloody great to see top-level racing again, wasn't it? I absolutely loved it, and I hope those of you who joined us on GCN Plus did too. If you missed any of it, it is available on demand on the app, and there are short and long highlights from each stage too, with a couple of small territory restrictions, so make sure you look out for them. I've also got more for you to come this week. I'll get onto the live racing in just a moment, but first up, the films and documentaries that we've been working so hard on for so long are finally available for public consumption, which I am incredibly excited about. So there are 24 right now on GCN Plus, and we'll be releasing another 2 per week from the start of March. There's all sorts of subject matter there covered in these first few films, but I thought you'd probably be most interested in the racing related ones. So here's a quick teaser of my visit to see the legend that is Andy Schleck.
In the morning I went in the hospital. They said you need to have an operation, and basically never recovered from it.
Cycling is finished for me now. I will end my career end of this year. My new life started that day.
In February of 2015, he bought a dilapidated old barn and then renovated it into his bike shop.
When there's races on, people come in, they watch the race, they can live cycling a bit here.
Do you miss racing?
It's different, so change perspective. I miss my teammates. I miss that a little bit, the social part of it, with the boys. If I'm really honest, I also miss the fame. Suddenly, a lot of things were gone in my life which I had before. And you realize that actually, your whole identity was, the guy in the yellow jersey. If I would go back, I believe I could win a lot more races. But you can always talk, what if that crash didn't have happened? What if I would have won 5 Tour de France's, I don't believe I would be happier today,
Now, I've also been out to see Fabian Cancellara and Andrea Taffi, and all 3 of those are amongst the documentaries that you can now all watch from today. And we'd love your feedback on all of them. If you give them a watch, leave a comment below this video and we will be sure to read it. Don't forget too, incidentally, that our 50% off full price offer will end at the end of this month of February. With that 50% off, it makes it £20, €20 or $25 for a full 12 months of films and racing coverage. Still can't quite believe we're doing it for that sort of price, but it's great news for you. Right, on to the racing that is coming up this week. So we've got the Tour des Alpes Maritimes et du Var in France, which is a 3-day race, but only the final 2 stages are produced live. So you'll be able to see those live in all GCN Plus territories on Saturday and Sunday. So that includes the USA, Canada and Australia. We've got your backs covered there. Amongst the riders confirmed to start that race are Fuglsang, Gegenhardt, Van Avermaet, Pinot, Thomas, Sivakov, Woods, Pidcock and Nairo Quintana. So make sure you do not miss that one because there are going to be fireworks. We've also got our final cyclocross races of the season this coming Saturday with the Vastland Cross. But we're going to move on now to a race that's already happened, the Clasica de Almeria, which ended up kick-starting the Spanish season yesterday after the cancellations or postponements of Mallorca, Andalusia and Valenciana. It's a sprinter's 1-day race and it was the first day for Mark Cavendish back in Deceuninck Quick-Step colours. They also had Jose Alvaro Hodge, but a fall for the Colombian at 20 k's to go ended his race. Cavendish himself was then dropped inside the last few kilometres, but Deceuninck Quick-Step did still do a full-on lead-out for their French sprinter Florian Sénéchal. He was delivered absolutely perfectly, you've got to say, with 200 metres to go, but by the time he launched his own sprint, Giacomo Nizzola was already coming past him. The European champion then took his first win of the season so far, and in fact the first for his newly named Quebecer Assos squad. A clear margin of victory in the end it was too. Florian Sénéchal was in second and Martin Lass of Bora Hansgrohe was in third on the day. Right, so I'm going to hand you over now to Jeremy Powers to wrap up the action from the penultimate weekend of cyclocross action for this season.
Thank you, Dan. We had some great racing over the weekend. On Saturday, it went down in Eeklo, Belgium, properly West Flanders, and the course had really everything. Very, very pretty course, shot super well, but it had mud, black ice, snow, off cambers, steep uphill sections. It was really something special. I mean, from just the conditions, it had literally everything. And half the course was like completely dry because of the sun and the way it was hitting it. Anyway, it was wild. It went down on the women's side. At about the halfway point, the Pauwels and Bingo rider Denise Betsema dispatched all of her challengers to be able to ride super clean and almost look like she was going to kind of ride away with the victory. But in the final lap, a couple of errors started to add up. And on the final last steep uphill bit that kind of went off to the right, Betsema bobbles. Manon Bakker, the under-23 racer of Cruyff and Fridstads, who had previously been on the podium in Overijse and in Hama leading up to the World Championships, she comes from behind and then tries to pass Betsema on the left-hand side, but also bobbles. Betsema ends up being able to ride away to the finish line and put her hands up for her 6th victory of the season. Bakker finishes 2nd place and Lucinda Brand finished it out in 3rd. Now, on the men's side, it was all about Quinten Hermans, the Tormans CX rider who got injured at the Dauphiné in August, come back on the recovery train pretty much all season long, just could not find his, well, what he called his top level. I thought he was doing great, everybody else did, but he felt like he was in a very dark spot with all the physical therapy, all the rehabilitation. Finally, just like Wout van Aert last year in Lille, he comes back and takes the victory at the Ethias Cross. He was able to get rid of Toon Arts, but Toon Arts and Eli Iserbyt did a crazy battle in the final laps with Toon Arts able to take 2nd place, Eli Iserbyt able to take 3rd. But Quinten Hermans, so emotional after the finish, just crying, couldn't get it together in the interviews. You have to go see it. It was such a great race to see a true sportsman just elated to be able to take a big victory and get a huge weight off of his shoulders. It was really, really special to be able to commentate and watch that one. Now, on Sunday, the final round of the X2O Bodkamers Trophy from Brussels University. And then on the women's side, there's only really been one winner of this race, and that is Celine del Carmen Alvarado of Alpecin Fenix. Alvarado won it in 2019 before she was world champion, won it again when she was world champion, and then won it again this year. But while Alvarado was amazing and rode such a perfect race, super technical track, behind the overall of the X2O Bodkamers Trophy is computed on time, not points. So Lucinda Brand goes into it with the lead, but Denise Betsema 41 seconds behind Brand. Well, it ended up that Brand found herself on the back foot, and in the final lap ends up bobbling, going up some weird kind of uphill stairs that are made of grass. She bobbles, gets a ton of snow and ice and stuff stuck in her pedals. She can't clip in, and she just barely, by the skin of her teeth, comes in only by 5 seconds to win the overall series. But it was enough to take it away from Betsema. Betsema, she really brought it to Brand. In Brand's defense, she rode the perfect season. They called it the Grand Slam. She won the World Cup overall, the Super Prestige, the X2O Trophy, and the World Championship. So Brand went home 30,000 euros richer, and she was very, very happy, to say the least. Well, at the finish, she actually wasn't very happy, but after it was all said and done, she was very happy to be able to take the overall of the X2O. All right, now on the men's side for Brussels University, it was a big day out. Although there was no overall opportunities really, although I guess you could have made an argument for it if anything had happened to Eli Iserbit, but he was in the lead by almost 4.5 minutes going into this one. So there's almost no real worry as long as he rode a decent race that he was gonna lose the overall title. But on the day, the honors for the final race, that was a hotly contested battle between Toon Aerts and Quinten Hermans, both of them locking horns at about the halfway point, going back and forth, but it ended up that Toon Aerts, who hasn't won in almost 3.5 months, was able to take the win over Quinten Hermans. Now, you'd say, yeah, man, Toon Aerts, big rider, won the overall of the Super Prestige. What's up with that? Yeah, but he didn't take any wins on the podium at the World Championships with Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, but didn't take any wins. So a very big day for the Ballawassa Trek team, with obviously Lucinda Brand taking the overall of the X2O Trophy, and also with Toon Aerts taking the honors on the day. Quinten Hermans would come in second, but it was also the young rider Niels van der Putte, only 20 years old, of the Alpecin Fenix team, that would ride to a career best 3rd place. So very, very good ride for van der Putte on the day. That was all the racing. Next weekend, we've got the final round of the Ethias Cross from St. Nicholas, also our final race on GCN Plus for this season's cyclocross. I know, we're gonna have to start a little group to be able to talk to each other. Maybe in the app, I'll talk to the guys over there, see if we can get a support group for missing cyclocross, but that is all I have. Thank you very much. Back over to you, Dan.
Thank you very much again, Jeremy. Moving on, the New Zealand National Road Champs took place last week. Georgia Williams did the double in the elite women's events, taking the time trial by 22 seconds and then getting the better of Kate McCarthy in the road race. In the men's, Aaron Gate took the time trial. The top three all separated by just 2 seconds in that event, with Michael Vink in third and George Bennett missing out by just a single second in second. He made no mistake in the road race though, winning that by almost 2 minutes on his own. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing both those National Championships jerseys worn by Williams and Bennett in the European races this year. The New Zealand one, done properly, is in my opinion the classiest in the world. Now last week, the Giro d'Italia organisers RCS Sport announced which teams would receive their final wildcard invitations, and it was a bit of a surprise and a bit of controversy too. Elo Cometa, which is the team of Ivan Basso and Alberto Contador, were one of the invites, and the others were Bardiani CSF and Vinny Zabu. Now the controversy there is that Vinny Zabu had a rider who tested positive in last year's race, whilst Androni, who didn't get an invite, had a rider on the podium last year with Simon Pelot, who won the intermediate sprints classification. Now, rather understandably, the manager of Androni, Gianni Savio, was fuming about this decision. His team have performed very well at the Giro d'Italia over recent years, including a stage win back in 2019, and he also publicly defended the race after that rider's strike in last year's edition. It also means, incidentally, that we won't be seeing Nairo Quintana race the Giro d'Italia this year, despite his hopes to be there. His team, Arkea Samsic, didn't get an invite either, so now his main focus for the year will be the Tour de France. And the other Grand Tour, the Vuelta a España, announced its route for the 21 stages last week, and the headlines are that it remains entirely within Spanish borders for the race, that it doesn't finish in Madrid this year, as it has done since 2015. Instead, they are going to be starting in Burgos and finishing in the province of Coruña, 3,336 kilometres later. Right, just before we finish, a quick mention of Jost Loudon, because last week the drop cycling rider unofficially broke the women's world hour record apparently, which is still held by Vittoria Busi. This news came from tweets sent out by Sean Yates and Dan Bigham, who claimed that Loudon had covered 48.160 kilometres in a practice run, which was 153 metres farther than Busi. However, both tweets have mysteriously since been deleted. Presumably though, if that was a practice run, the real thing can't be far away, and so we wish Joss the very best of luck. Right, that is all for this week's GCN Racing News Show. Don't forget to let us know what you think of those first batch of cycling films on GCN+. We'd very much appreciate your feedback, good or bad, as we're pretty determined to make the best cycling content we can for you. Bye for now.